Hello, I'm going to describe what vibrational astrology is. Vibrational astrology is increasing in popularity very rapidly. For example, there is going to be an annual vibrational astrology conference in April of every year in Gainesville, Florida. So the first one is April 5 through 7 in the year 2019. And a lot of people are asking, well, what is this vibrational astrology? I'm thinking about attending your conference. I've got some ideas about what it's about. Can you summarize it quickly? What is this all about? Okay, so that's what I'm going to do in this video. Let's summarize what vibrational astrology is. And first, let me give you a concept, a way that we look at the world in vibrational astrology. The most obvious thing in vibrational astrology is that we see life as a tapestry, a beautiful, intricate design. So in most astrology, we divide the sky into 12 pieces, 12 zodiac signs, 12 houses. We have a handful of aspects in Western astrology and a lot of complex relationships between the planets and where they are in the houses and signs in Vedic astrology. But in vibrational astrology, we're looking at an intricate system. So this visual gives you an idea of how we're thinking about life. That life is not divided strictly into 12. We have 5 fingers on each hand. We have 5 toes or 5 petals on many flowers. There are many, many frequencies for sound. There aren't discrete frequencies that are the only one. Same thing for light. There are all these different vibrations. And we live in an intricate, beautiful vibrational universe. Another thing that you'll hear about vibrational astrology is people saying, oh, it really works. There's research. What happens when you do people's charts is incredible. It's like more grounded, more factual. So there is some truth to that in the sense that we do have a large body of controlled research. We're very strict in the requirements to determine things in personal consultations. So we have a very sophisticated and beautiful system of astrology. And whether it really works so wonderfully or not, you can decide for yourself as you study it and you get into it. But many, many of the people who've studied vibrational astrology and developed, some expertise in it, they've studied it for a while, they're generally concluding the same thing. It's an oh my God experience. This is incredible. So these are some of the things that you're hearing about vibrational astrology and what's going on and what the atmosphere surrounding vibrational astrology is about. And so here on this slide, I'm just showing images from nature, whether it's a snowflake or a flower, and up in the right, you might recognize that as a fractal pattern as well. So the mathematics tying together with nature in these beautiful ways. And vibrational astrology is part of this movement of discovery of the intricate fractal mathematics and nature of life, and we see it in astrology as well. So that's the general, you might say, philosophical overview. Now let me tell you about 7 specific things that we interpret in vibrational astrology. Number 1, minor aspects. So in vibrational astrology, we believe that you can take fifths of a circle, sevenths, ninths, 11ths, and these are important. So let me give you a clear idea of what I'm talking about. Here's the birth chart of the famous rock and roll singer Aretha Franklin. And in her birth chart, we see Venus at 20 degrees Aquarius, down near the bottom of the chart. Uranus at 27 degrees Taurus in the 7th house. Pluto up in the 9th house at 3 degrees Leo. Now in Aretha Franklin's chart, Venus is 3/11ths of a circle from Uranus. So if you had 11 people at a party and you had a pizza or a cake and you divided that pizza or cake into 11 equal pieces so that everybody had the same size slice of pizza or slice of cake, that's exactly what we're doing here. We've divided the circle into 11 equally sized pieces. And when you do that, 3 of those pieces, 3/11ths of the circle, separate Venus and Uranus. 2/11ths of a circle separate Uranus and Pluto. And therefore, 3/11ths plus 2/11ths is 5/11ths of a circle separates Venus and Pluto. Now, for most astrologers, this is, trivial. I mean, who cares? We don't divide the circle into 11 pieces normally. Well, in vibrational astrology, we do, and we think it's extremely important, and we think this is a huge breakthrough. And some of you may recognize that this is part of harmonic astrology as well. So vibrational astrology has a lot in common with harmonic astrology. It also has some big differences from harmonic astrology, as we will see in a minute. Okay, so that's an example of what we do in vibrational astrology. 3 planets divided by the same denominator. We sometimes call that the frequency or the vibration, or also called the harmonic. So we can say in vibrational astrology that Aretha Franklin has Venus, Uranus, and Pluto in an 11 vibration. You get it? They're in an 11 vibration because they've divided the circle into 11ths. And it's not so important whether the Venus-Uranus is 3 11ths or 2 11ths or 1 11th. It's an 11th. And it puts these 3 planets in an 11 vibration. Now here's the birth chart of Bob Dylan. And he was born around the same time. Let's see, he was born in 1941, May 1941, and Aretha Franklin was born in March 1942. So they're born about a year apart. And during 1941 to 1942, Uranus and Pluto were moving in and out of a 2 11ths aspect. Now, I don't know how many degrees that is. I don't care. It's just 2 11ths of a circle. And for Bob Dylan, Venus moved over here into 12 degrees Gemini, almost 13 degrees Gemini, and it's 1/22nd of a circle. Now, at this point, you might think, oh, you've got to be kidding me, David. 1/22nd of a circle, and you think that's important? Yep, I think it's extremely important. So Venus and Uranus are separated by 1/22nd of a circle. So if you took 360 and you divide it by 22, that angular distance is what Venus and Uranus are separated by. And Venus and Pluto are 3/22. And if you add 1/22 plus 3/22, you'll get 2 11ths. Now, on the right side, I have a summary of Aretha Franklin has these aspects, as I told you. Venus 3 11ths Uranus, Uranus 2 11ths Pluto, Venus 5 11ths Pluto. Notice, by the way, that we can just describe an aspect as a fraction of a circle. We don't have to have fancy names for it. So an aspect is a fraction of a circle. And then below that, I have the aspects between Venus and Uranus and Pluto for Bob Dylan, which I just told you. Venus 3/22 Uranus, Uranus 2 11ths Pluto, and Venus 1/22 Pluto. Question at the bottom. Do you see a similarity between Aretha Franklin and Bob Dylan, a similarity of their Venus, Uranus, and Pluto? Do you see it? I'll give you a few seconds. It shouldn't be difficult. They're very similar because 22 is twice as big as 11. So 11 times 2 is 22. And what we find in vibrational astrology is that when you double the number, you double that denominator. We also call it the frequency or vibration. Another word for it is harmonic. That number 11, that frequency, when you double the frequency, you get a similar result. And so 22 has some of the same qualities as 11. What are the qualities of 11 and 22? Dynamic, moving, restless, on the go, independent, self-willed, sometimes going off on their own, kind of resistant to other people's opinions. It's a hungry, dynamic, moving vibration, and we see many, many, many rock and roll stars, the most popular people in rock and roll, having Venus, Uranus, and Pluto in an 11 vibration or a similar vibration like 22, which is essentially the same. It's very, very similar to an 11 vibration. So do you get the idea? The idea of vibrational astrology is that there are all these vibrations. and you just see if the planets are arranged in a particular vibration. And if there are a lot of planets, even just 3 planets, in a certain vibration, meaning they're all dividing the circle by the same number, then those planets are on that frequency. And Venus, Uranus, Pluto sounds like rock and roll, doesn't it? I mean, the spontaneity of Uranus, the compulsiveness of Pluto, the Venus-Uranus gives rhythm, excitability. In an 11 vibration, very electric, very spontaneous, can't sit still, on the go, powerful. Rock and roll is a typical manifestation of those energies. So I'm illustrating the concept here with these charts. Okay, so here I mentioned when you double a vibration, you get a similar effect. We already know this because you take a sextile, which is 1/6 of a circle, that's doubling 1/3, isn't it? 1/3, which is the trine, 120 degrees. You double the 3, you get 6, and sextiles and trines are both soft. They're not identical, but they're both soft. Same thing if you take half of a circle, which is an opposition, a hard aspect. You double the denominator, 2 times 2 equals 4. You get the square, also a hard aspect. So we already do this. Is that cool or what? We already double the denominator to get a similar effect. The big difference in vibrational astrology is we use all these different numbers. And some people feel that that's a little wild, a little crazy. Like, how could there really be all these different aspects? Well, that's why I gave you the vision of what vibrational astrology is. We live in an intricate vibrational universe. It's just the way it is. And when you unlock the astrology into this larger vibrational context, wow, the astrology just zooms up in its accuracy, in the way that it's relevant, in the way it can describe things. Okay, so those are some of the basic concepts in vibrational astrology. Okay, so that's point number 1. We use minor aspects. Another thing, point number 2, I've got 7 points. Point number 2, we use direct midpoint structures. And let me show you an example of a direct midpoint structure. This is the birth chart of a fellow, Timothy Leary, who became famous back in, I guess it was the late 60s or so, he was a professor, and he kind of dropped out of society and started taking LSD and made it a kind of way of life. And what you see in Timothy Leary's birth chart is here's Mercury in the 12th house at 22 degrees Scorpio. And it's the distance of Mercury to Neptune is the same as the distance of Mercury to Uranus. So Mercury is halfway in between Uranus and Neptune. And we call that the midpoint. And actually it's on what we call the far midpoint. So this point here at 22 degrees Taurus is also halfway in between. So 22 degrees Taurus and 22 degrees Scorpio, both of those are the same distance from Neptune and Uranus. It's at the midpoint. So we have a little tree diagram here. It's probably a little bit small to read, but it's showing that Mercury is opposition the Uranus-Neptune midpoint. And guess what the orb is? 2 minutes. It's like 2 minutes almost exactly between Uranus and Neptune. And then, this is amazing, Uranus is opposition the midpoint of Saturn and Neptune. So we add one more planet, Saturn, and we get another midpoint configuration. We sometimes call these midpoint structures. So, or they're more specifically called direct midpoint structures. It means a planet is directly on the midpoint or opposition the midpoint. So the midpoint of Saturn and Neptune is about 1 or 2 degrees Virgo, right over here at the top of the chart. And Uranus at almost 2 degrees Pisces is opposition. So over here on this midpoint tree, we call it, it shows Uranus is opposition the Saturn-Neptune midpoint with a 3-minute orb. So those are midpoint structures. And Uranus-Neptune is inspired, it's crazy, it's wild, it's visionary. Mercury there, and then the Uranus-Saturn-Neptune disturbed, it's sort of a disjointed kind of inspiration, and it describes a lot of what Timothy Leary's life is about. So what we believe in vibrational astrology is that by looking at these midpoint patterns and looking at these vibrational patterns, we can see the frequency, the vibration that people are on, and the planets that are in those vibrations, and it describes who they are so incredibly well. And the midpoint structure, by the way, is also a kind of vibration, because you can think of the distance of Neptune to Mercury as like a vibrating string, a length of a string, and the Mercury-Uranus distance, the same distance. It's like two strings playing the same note, and it brings these three planets together into a resonating pattern. And we believe in vibrational astrology that when you look at these vibrational patterns, the aspect patterns, the midpoint patterns, you will see the biggest things that describe what the person is, what they do, what their motivation is. If they're a musician, if they're a scientist, if whatever it is, you'll see it in those vibrational patterns. So this really just is so exciting, breakthrough to another level of understanding astrology. Okay, third point about vibrational astrology is that each planet, zodiac, sign, and house performs a function. So for example, Venus shows how we're attracted to beauty. And each zodiac sign performs a function. Let me show you an example of what I mean by that. Here is a person with a huge amount of Leo. Sun and Moon are in Leo. Jupiter, Venus, and Mercury are also in Leo. Gemini is rising, so the ruler of the ascendant is Mercury, and it is one of the planets in Leo. This is a huge amount of Leo. He is the super Leo. Huge. And this is one of the kinds of research we do. We find the people who have something huge, in this case, huge Leo. And then we have to analyze those charts. We're not cherry picking the data. We must figure out how this person is a huge Leo. And it's Jean Piaget, the great child psychologist. I read his biographies and read about him. I could find really no description of him in terms of Leo. Not charismatic, not a strong leader, not arrogant. Where is his Leo? His whole life work is the story of Leo. Because what Leo is really about is the fact that we are individuals. We are the king or queen of our energy field. And we rule over our energy field. And it makes you self-conscious. And it's about you as an individual. You can think of it as the cosmic consciousness separated out into a field which is your being. And the awareness that you have control over your energy field and your world is what Leo's about. So it's a process, it's a function that underlies the personality characteristics and even is underneath the archetypal stories. So Jean Piaget was a bit of a genius. He was writing academic papers in biology as a child. He's like a child prodigy, but he uses this scientific knowledge in psychology. He moves out of the sciences and applies it to psychology because he wants to figure out how we become individuals. It's just amazing. He is a super Leo, but not in the way we usually think. So this is what we do in vibrational astrology. We study the data, and we don't just cherry pick the charts that fit what we want, and we see if it fits. And we've come up with this idea that everything is performing one simple direct function. So we've come up with new ideas of how to look at the fundamental things in astrology. And that's how we can understand Jean Piaget and everyone else, hundreds of people that we've analyzed in our studies, and get consistent results. Okay, so that's a third part of vibrational astrology, is how we go into the chart and analyze what the planets are doing, what the signs are doing, and so on. Okay, point number 4, and I've already started to give some hints about this, is that the aspects and the midpoint patterns tell us how energy is trying to flow, we could say, or we could call it the patterns of our lives. And the zodiac signs tell us an attitude or an approach to life. And when we do our research studies, it's more difficult to pin down the zodiac signs to a behavior. So if we say that Leo is going to be an actor or be dramatic, Actually, in our research, we found that actors do not have more Leo than other signs, but their lives revolve around individuality, and it's a much more difficult thing to put a number on or to quantify, whereas aspects and midpoint patterns are much easier. So they work in different ways. Okay, aspect patterns and midpoint patterns are much easier to see the behavior that they lead to, and they work better in research. That does not mean zodiac signs are less important. It just means some things are easier to research in a formal way, and other things exist, but you can't put them into a box. I mean, you can't measure them very simply. So this is what we've come up with in vibrational astrology. Fifth point, VA, short for vibrational astrology, is very practical. And so you'll hear about all these numbers, and I'm telling you all these theories, and that planets perform a function, and it sounds very abstract, but that's only when I'm describing the theory. What VA is about is sitting in front of a client and interpreting their chart and trying to help them and give direction and give understanding. It's very grounded, it's very practical, and all of these theories and concepts and models developed out of the practical application. So what vibrational astrology is primarily about is you working with people, understanding yourself, your friends, your family, if you're doing consultations, your clients. It's very practical, very grounded, very useful. And point number 6, I've already talked about, is that VA is very strongly evidence-based. We do conduct controlled research studies. We do have high standards for confirming what is true or not true when we're interpreting the chart for a client. And one of the kinds of research methods we use is called extreme case sampling studies, and we have other research methods we use. But as a practicing astrologer, you do not need to be concerned very much about research. You don't have to be into research methods. That's something the VA researchers do. We have a VA research group that meets once a month, for example, and we analyze the data, we come up with the ideas. But the great majority of people in VA are not involved in research. They're using it with their clients. They're looking at those midpoint patterns. They're looking at those vibrational patterns to see what the potential of the person is, what their motivations are, what their talents are, when things get triggered by transits, how things overlay in the charts, how you find the best place to live or to work or whatever it is. So we do the same things everybody else does: compatibility forecasting, relocational astrology, etc., using these ideas in vibrational astrology. And the last thing is that harmonic charts are extensively used. It's one of the tools that we use to see all of these aspects. We don't look at listings of aspects. We analyze something called a harmonic chart. So you do end up needing to learn about harmonic charts when you do vibrational astrology. And I'll give you a simple, quick idea of what a harmonic chart is. We saw earlier that Aretha Franklin has Venus, Uranus, and Pluto in 11 vibration. They are 11ths. Remember that? I showed you that two of the planets are 2 11ths and 3 11ths and 5 11ths. They're 11ths. So there's a thing called a harmonic chart. We sometimes just call it vibrational chart. Whatever you want to call it, it's usually called a harmonic chart. But I like the word vibration because it's more clearly what we're talking about. We're talking about vibration or the word frequency. I don't really like the word harmonic because it doesn't really say what we're talking about. It's too complicated. We're talking about frequency. We're talking about a beat. We're talking about how it's like a waltz. 1 2 3 1 2 3. Those are the trines, or 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4. Those are the squares. What is the beat, the rhythm, the frequency? Anyway, there's this thing called an 11th harmonic chart. You can do a harmonic chart for any number. If you do the 11th harmonic, it takes all the planets that are in 11ths. Here's the Uranus, Pluto, and Venus. Part of fortune happens to be there as well, but we can ignore that. Uranus, Pluto, and Venus are all together. They're all conjunct within about a 10-degree orb, which might sound large, but we use large orbs in these vibrational charts up to 16 degrees. It works differently from usual charts. Anyway, she's got Venus, Pluto, and Uranus all conjunct, tells us that they're in an 11 vibration. And just one more thing, and then I'm done with this video. is that, remember Bob Dylan had those 20 seconds? Venus is 1/22nd to Uranus and 3/22 to Pluto, and it will show up in the 11th harmonic chart. This is the 11th harmonic chart for Bob Dylan, as Uranus and Pluto opposition Venus. And you see the orbs here are small. 4 degrees for the conjunction. Venus opposition Uranus is almost exact. It has a 6-minute orb. So there's the Venus, Uranus, Pluto, and we also look at other aspects in the harmonic chart as well. That's a quick idea of what vibrational astrology is. I'm at almost 26 minutes, so at least in less than half an hour, I've given you the basic idea of what vibrational astrology is all about. From here, it's just learning what each vibration means, how it functions in the person's chart, how we understand the zodiac signs and the planets, how the things interact. We just learn all the details. But those are the concepts around which vibrational astrology is built. There are some other ideas as well, but that's maybe 80 to 90% of the concepts are right there. Learning how to do it and perfect it and use it and apply it can take years to master. It's just like if I was to show you the piano and say, here are the keys, here are the notes, here's what the scales are. You can learn that in a half hour. Now you practice, and you learn the intricacies of it, and you develop the expertise to play piano. That can take years. So that's the fundamentals of vibrational astrology. I think that's my last slide. Well, here's another one. I won't go into this. But just the last thing is, again, the Vibrational Astrology Conference, April 5 through 7. If you go to astrosoftware.com and you go to this menu item up here, a conference, you'll see the information about the Vibrational Astrology Conference. April 5 through 7 in Gainesville, Florida. It's where the latest information is being presented. And even if you're a beginner, you can attend the conference. On Friday night, I give a lecture similar to what I just presented here, a little bit longer, a little more detail on what the basic language is. That's all you need to know, because vibrational astrology is so new that even experienced astrologers, it's new for them. So it's new for everybody, and it's exciting. So at the conference, we present the latest research, the breakthroughs, the discoveries over the past year. We have this conference every year because we make a lot of insights every year. It's evolving, developing, becoming more precise and accurate in our ability to interpret. So we have some of the best researchers, people applying the ideas, speaking, everybody sharing. It's an exciting event. And again, even if you don't know anything about vibrational astrology other than this video, you can still attend, because you'll be seeing us talking about the fractions of the circle, those frequencies, those vibrations. That's the basic idea, and how they work and what they do in a person's chart. Okay, that's it, my friends. A short video on what is vibrational astrology. I hope that it helps. And a lot of you have been asking for this video. I was hoping to make it even shorter. It's almost a half hour long. But in any case, I hope that helps. Thank you very much for listening. God bless. Namaste.